Ahoy hoy gang, if this is your first time with us, welcome, and if you're joining us from a previous video, hey, we love to see it, and I hope you're doing well. Happy Hillodays, folks! Did you like the thumbnail? Did you like the blindingly green thumbnail? Yeah, we're doing some fun stuff this year. So yeah, for Christmas, I'm gonna be doing a top 5 countdown of both King of the Hill and Bob's Burgers, season by season, leading up to our Christmas celebration. And with both of these shows, yeah, the first season's super short, so it's more, here's my top half of the season. But there are a lot of episodes to enjoy. So, what worked, what failed, what Dennis Hopper cameos will be curtailed. Hey, look at this. It's season 1's top 5 list. Number 5, Luanne's Saga. I love Luanne's Saga for a lot of reasons. I know people are going to be upset. I'm just going to tell you now, Keeping Up with Our Joneses is not on the list. More so out of, I don't want to show a bunch of, Bobby smoking on the channel. It's still an honorable mention. But I think Luanne's Saga even then would have inched it out. Not only is it a great starter Luanne episode, it's a fantastic first real example of Boomhauer as a character, and it really elevates what King of the Hill is going to be. It's willing to branch out and have stories focused on these characters. And I love the fact that Boomhauer's just like, yeah, dang old no, man. Dang old no. And like everybody else can't understand Boomhauer, but the audience very obviously can. And it's so charming in a way. It's so simple and elegant, and I love that Hank has that change of heart that at least feels natural for him. It never feels like it's really all that forced on him. How many times is he really using that den? Let's be honest. Also just shows us great Buckley is awful bits, and I adore that. Like, I don't know. It's a good episode. It's got fantastic jokes. It's great to see how already evolved the characters are. 7 episodes into the show? Not even. I think this is episode 5. Like, it's wild to me how full of potential King of the Hill actually was. And now it's, as we got later into the seasons, it was very much more about episodic ideas. But Luanne's Saga was a brilliant setup for who Luanne was as a character before we went deeper on her journey. It gave us a good example of Boomhauer being really the opposite of Glenn Quagmire. Yeah, he sleeps around, but he's not like a skeevy monster about it. It's a very important balancing act that I don't think we appreciate how deftly they managed it in just the first season. I don't know, Luanne's Saga it just hits different. Number 4, The Order of the Straight Arrow. First off, I don't know what I was on when I was doing this episode, when I was reviewing it in the big, 12-hour review. I remember the crane scene. I have seen it since then. I have seen it in my review. And I don't know where I got, it spread its wings against the sun. It didn't. It absolutely did. It got up and flew off, and that's still a really cool shot. But I'm picturing this, Porco Rosso-esque, phoenix rising, flying off. It's like, wow, that's impressive that they animated it that well, 25 years ago. They didn't. I just completely misremembered it, and that's fine, I guess. But The Order of the Straight Arrow is brilliant. It's a perfect example of how early King of the Hill's jokes were very situational and conversational. You had Peggy sneaking around with her shoe quest. You had, Bobby bludgeoning a whooping crane with his whip-ass stick. And that'll never not be funny. But we also get, just a really wholesome Hank, Bobby, and Hank and the boys story about how Hank wants Bobby to believe in him and, trust him. And it makes sense. It's just every angle you could approach this episode from, it's perfect. There is never a moment where I was watching it and bored. And I went back and I revisited most of these episodes for this. And I was still enchanted. I was still beating myself up because there's absolutely no way the crane flew off that majestically. But it was also really cool to see the social commentary of all the protesters stomping on the eggs and destroying the wetlands that they were protesting to defend. And it's not pushed one way or the other. It's just, see what hypocrites humans are? And it's like, you know what, Mike Judge? That is so baseline. That is so vanilla. I appreciate it. I'll take that. It shined through. Season 1 of a show is not necessarily the strongest. It just so happens that King of the Hill and Bob's Burgers had really, really, really strong first seasons. Number 3, pilot. Like, okay, if we're gonna do a pilot, if you're gonna make an animated series pilot, and you don't even look at how King of the Hill did it, I guarantee you, your pilot is just gonna crash and burn. King of the Hill's pilot is arguably, to this day, after, 29 some odd years, almost 30 at this point, My Bones Creek, that pilot is still one of the best pilots of any animated series of all time. It sets up exactly who the characters are, what their motivations are, Hank's relationship to Bobby, Hank's relationship to Peggy, and it even addresses what people would initially think about Hank right in that first episode. He's always flying off the hook, his family must live in fear of him. It's like, no, he'd never hit either of them. He loves them, he adores them, and it's that very soft telegraphing of how Hank is as a character that makes him such an approachable and likable guy. You see him getting frustrated, you see him getting heated, but you never see him, really explode or really take that out on Peggy or Bobby. And also, as far as early voices go, sure, they're very prototypical, but there's also such a charm of hearing people, experimenting with characters that have become so timeless. To hear that awkward inflection in Bobby's voice, to gaze out at, I said it in the review, I'll say it again when I was watching it, those backgrounds are gorgeous. If you're watching it on anything, just watch the pilot, pause, and appreciate that you can actually see the watercolor strokes in the background. I know that sounds dumb. I know that sounds like the most Bob Ross thing imaginable, but it is a pretty pilot. It is a pretty pilot in both, just genuine execution and set design. I love it. I love the pilot so much. It's still one of my favorite episodes of the entire show, and yet still not number 1 on this list, which shows how strong the season was. Number 2, Peggy the Boggle Champ. What's going on down there at that mower expo? I gotta know what's at the mower expo. Peggy the Boggle Champ is a ton of fun. I always revisit it. It is one of the 5 episodes I remember vividly. If I ever got sick and I was home from school and it was November, October, for whatever reason, you put on UPN. You watch Adult Swim starting at the ripe hour of 6 p.m. And sure enough, it's probably gonna be Peggy the Boggle Champ. It was always playing, and it was easy to see why, because it's got great jokes, its performances are incredible, and it's a great standalone episode. It has that perfect blend of realistic and fantastical that I really appreciate. And I know that sounds weird to say that an episode of King of the Hill is fantastical, but the Mower Expo is just held to this higher standard, and it's portrayed as this big convention center just filled to the brim with mowing things. And that is a thing. You can go to big conventions like that for, BEA broadcast conventions and stuff like that, where you'll see different cameras and different, film setups, and it's very cool to see. But it's also a very fantastical idea. It's a very extreme idea. And I appreciate that you have this fantastical, he's getting lost in the mower convention, you guys. And then you bring it all back with Peggy having this very personal conflict with the Boggle champion who's walking around like she owns the town, which, if you're that good at Boggle in, rural Southern America, you probably own your local church. It's just, it's such good down-home Americana in the most wholesome way. Again, I said in the review, but my grandmother would go to Scrabble tournaments, to Boggle tournaments, and that was what we did. Conventional internet wasn't in every home. Some people were lucky to have cable television. So, you found fun where you had it, and a lot of the times you were going to different conventions. You were, becoming the state champion at Duel Masters. My only claim to fame. But it's so fun. Peggy the Boggle Champ is a fun episode of King of the Hill, and I adore it for what it does. It's an episode I could revisit. I could watch this episode 15 times in a row and never get bored. It's just the best. number 1, Hank's got the willies. So as much as I love Peggy the Boggle Champ, I was revisiting this episode, and I think this is easily one of the best formative episodes for Hank. Not only do you see his, emotional attachments laid bare, but it's also Hank getting to spend time with his hero, Willie Nelson, who is the most, rebel country, rebel rock, whatever you want to call him. He is not someone that a traditional, propane manager would be listening to. And I love that. I love that little spark of ambition, that little dream, that little glimmer in Hank's eye that this episode gives you. This is a guy that loves music because it's a way for him to communicate with his family. He sings about how much he loves his wife, but he can barely tell her to her face he loves her. And the whole episode is Peggy thinking Hank cares more about the guitar than her. And that's great. That's a great angle to work with because it's not like, oh, Lois, I went with Death and he told me I should be treating you better. It was a weird episode. I'm going through Family Guy right now, and it is odd. But here, her conflict is resolved without her ever saying anything to Hank because she overhears him singing about her. He's singing about his love. And the fact that in this moment, he gets to sit on a couch and play with Willie Nelson with his beloved son by his side, his wife's next to him. He's just playing his guitar, having a good time. Dennis Hopper's over there for some reason, and it's magical. Again, it's what made King of the Hill so enchanting as a modern version of just genuine, Rockwellian Americana. And the lighting for this episode is so warm. There's so many orange hues, and it's gorgeous. Oh, I miss the shading of the earlier seasons of King of the Hill when it was mostly done, by hand or by traditional animation styles, rather than the digital one we get later on, where it becomes much more flat. There's so much more definition to work with in this episode. And, the dream sequence, maybe it's just because it looks softer, it has a softer hue to it, it feels way more cerebral. It hits the eye better. It's an episode I keep coming back to and appreciating more in it the older I get. It's an episode that, as a kid, you watch it and you go, oh, well, that was fine. And as an adult, you're like, yeah, okay, I understand it now. You can turn it off. I don't need to be relating too much to Hank here. It's a wonderful episode. And it makes you appreciate the things you have in your life. And there we have it, folks. That was my top 5 Season 1 episodes of King of the Hill. Anything you think I was right on, wrong on? What were your favorite episodes? Least favorite? Let me know in the comments below. And if you like what you saw, make sure to like, subscribe, and tell your friends. We're out here. Season 1, yeah, it makes me feel like a kid again going back through it. It feels super nostalgic. And I don't know. I feel all warm and fuzzy when I put on a Season 1 episode again. Simpler times when we could get excited for a mower expo, I don't know what the new one's gonna be, but I'm not ready for it. And that's gonna do it for us here at the Lecture Hall. If you want to support the channel, consider joining our Patreon or membership programs today. $2 a month and you get special polls, posts, and even your name on this fancy list. Woo! Like always, stay strong, keep fighting that good fight, remember that you matter, and I'm proud of you. And don't think we're stopping anytime soon. We've still got another episode coming for you tomorrow, and another after that. It just never ends. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.